Okay, looks like we're live, Simon.
Hey,
Can you
John.
hear me okay?
Check. I can, yes. Can you hear me?
Great. I can hear you perfectly. So thanks for doing this live stream. I'm glad we could do this. Just very first question that I'm going to answer, which is more of a self question. Why are we doing this Q&A? So this is kind of an impromptu Q&A that we put together, and I'll let you kind of chime in as well on this. But we've been getting a lot of questions about the new Mini-ALTOs, getting questions about sizing. So lots of activity, excitement around the new Mini-ALTO products. So felt like it was a good time before we start launching and shipping to get as many questions answered as possible. So that way, when people start seeing these out in shops, they'll know what to expect from the products, make sure they match up the right mics and get as much explanation. And also, I think there's some part of us that would like to provide more information, but given we're such a small team, we don't have a corporate marketing department. We can't put out, these tremendous how-to videos or make a 3-page instructional pamphlet. So I thought it'd just be a more casual way for us to answer as many questions as we can, and then we can post this out, and then hopefully get even more feedback from customers and people using the products. So, yeah. So I'll give that to you to say the same thing. What do you hope to get out of this Q&A and hope to get connected with customers?
Well, I think the Mini-ALTO is the result of a lot of stuff going on. We weren't expecting to do the longer sizes straight away. We thought we'd bring them in slowly, because ultimately we were looking at the Mini-ALTO was always designed as a sort of like an additional product. We'll refer to Lego a few times during these conversations anyway, but the whole idea is the range is also like building on one product fits to another, so it looks a bit lucky, but the idea is that we can do maybe sort of like quite clever designs that then allows things to work together, so they can mix and match and things. So the Mini-ALTO was always a bit about, for anyone that had bought a rad mount, we'll sort of like build and design a windshield that can primarily be used from interior to exterior. That's morphed a little bit, so hence the reason we're doing the longer ones, and also the MS ones that we'll come onto as well. But also that will then feed onto the future products that I'm pretty sure people will be interested in as well, because we're taking a bit stage by stage, very small team like John mentioned, but at the same time, as and when the products fit together, it starts to make sense, and then other ideas spawn from other ideas. So and questions are the best form of us sort of like questioning whether we should have done something this way or that way, and whether we need to improve things. So yeah, looking forward to it. So and it's literally an open door when it comes to these sort of development, because that's how I take this as well. If someone's had one of our products already and like something, don't like something, or it spawns another idea, that's where all of this has come from anyway. So yeah, the more openness the better, as far as we're concerned. So
yep. So I've got in front of me Facebook going. I've got questions that a lot of people already sent, so we do have a list of questions that people sent beforehand that we'll start answering. But if I could hone in on that kind of one thing you just said about answering questions, and this is what I'd like to further express to anyone who hasn't dealt with us directly yet. Very open. It's almost to the point of we want the feedback, because I think that's the hardest thing to do is for someone to come and offer feedback and offer a good idea, and then to kind of be rejected for that, and that discourages them to ever want to help you out again or give feedback or participate in test cases. So just to reiterate what you said, we love it for feedback, good, bad, attaboys, hey, this isn't working, can you help me? Because that's what we're all about. It's just trying to further solve a problem and make whatever we've made up to this point even better as we go, and make it forward compatible, backward compatible, to the sense that as we make improvements on anything, it'll still be able to fit with the existing kit that you've got. So first, I'm going to go way back to the beginning. I've got some video assets here, but one of the questions that keeps coming up for people who have yet to get a rad mount and have seen it, they get it, and then they're like, I think I'm going to break it. How do I put the mic in? Because they're used to some other top loading mounts that they press on. So that's the first thing. I'm going to play a video here. Everybody should be able to see it, but this is the way I do it. I like to stretch the actual mic clips out and push the mics through. And as you'll see here in the video, you take the safety strap off. You can push those, widen those mic clips. Those mic clips will actually stretch to fit up to, say, even a 30 millimeter diameter mic. I've used it with the Audio-Technica BP 28 millimeter diameter mic, which is really light mic, and the rad mount with the extra stiff hoop holds it. So that's the first step. You can slide the mic in that way. You can take those safety straps off completely. You can slide the mic underneath. You don't have to worry about breaking those mic clips or breaking the hoops. The hoops can bend over, lay flat, and they'll pop back up and retain their shape. So first basic question, how do I put the mic in the rad mount or the Mini-ALTO? So here's a video just trying to show that for those of you who haven't bought it yet or who get it and think, what size diameter can I fit in there? So I don't know. Anything you want to go into on your experience?
Just a very quick one, John, on the because the straps, these straps, and also you'll see safety straps on the outside of the Mini-ALTO. As an explanation, I would say probably about 80% of the people who I've seen using the rad mount since we started selling bin or put in a nice safe place the safety straps. The safety straps don't affect the usage. And the mount works perfectly without them. The reason we put them in was because when we're using these for the sports broadcast world, where microphones might get put inside a basket or a blimp and left for a season, and the worst thing that can ever happen is a mic can come out whilst they're not being taken in and out all the time. So we put these straps on there purely as a sort of safety feature, probably not specifically really for production sound. However, there is a benefit that because the clips are separate from the hoops themselves, so on a conventional mount where you've got the clip is made up of the same material as the outer part of the mount, these clips are separate. So when you've got the strap and you've actually put a larger microphone in there, if you want to return the clip back to the original shape and get the memory of the clip back, the strap provides a great way of doing that. You kind of ratchet up to those pegs, tighten it back up, and save using, say, like a larger MKH60, 25 mil mic, and you wanted to then put a smaller MKH50 or a 19 mil mic or something like that, you can use the strap whether the mic's in there or whether the mic's not in there, and you're just prepping for the next day. So the strap is not essential in use, but it does perform a bit of a sort of like a safety function, and also the ability to bring the clip back to the original.
Yeah, so that's a great point. I've got a picture that I'll share too. One thing I will say from some of the feedback is some of the longer shotgun mics, which are heavy in the front, so particularly MKH 416 or something, you might get like you're saying, if you've had a larger diaphragm mic in there, you stretch it out, you might get a little play. So the safety strap in the rear really locks it in place. But I haven't heard anybody, even without them, because of the soft grip, there's not a noise. A couple of people have said, I just like the safety straps in that long, heavy mic because I just feel like it really locks it in. So, but to your point on this one, is this a Pearl mic?
RSM 191.
Okay, the Neumann. So take the safety straps off. You can stretch those mic clips out. It fits on these larger larger diameter mics. And then as Simon mentioned, you put the safety straps back on to lock it down, because you're going to have a future use with a smaller mic, and it'll go back to that original memory and not be stretched out. So over time, it'll go back to its original shape, from what I'm understanding, Simon. But it just does it faster when you lock them down with the safety strap, it'll go back to its original image, you know, after a small amount of time, rather than letting it naturally, slowly conform back to its natural shape. And then I'll just go back to this picture right here. If you do move the hoops to the close together position, this is just another recommendation tip trick, is to swap the safety straps to where they face opposite directions, so the thick ends of the safety straps do not bump against each other. And that just shows you on the small short preamp mics, the difference between the hoops being further away or the hoops being closer together. So I'll let that play for a second. Yeah, MKH50 clips. So as you mentioned, originally we did not have MKH50 clips, so that was a situation where a lot of people would use it with the 50. It'd kind of be a little larger, and then they'd use the safety strap to lock it back down. So I'll just say the MKH50 clips are available, as well as the 19-20 mil clips, which will fit on any 19 to 21 mil, and they have no soft grip, but they are more of just the clip in place, and you'll get that audible clicking sound once you push those in. I was looking here and seeing, so these are the square clips at MKH50. And these are the 19 to 20, they're called 19-20 mil, but they'll fit up to a 21 mil diameter mic right here. So these just clip into place. Could you give a little detail about, I guess, the theory behind having these, one, the clips be different, but two, the clips be a separate component from the hoops?
Yeah. Okay. So we've got the ones you can see here in 19 to 20 mil. We've got the MKH. We've got 12.5 mil for some of the smaller sort of mics like LOM, and some sort of like specific. There's a couple of very sort of like boutique mics, probably not in production sound, and then we've got an 8 mil one which can be used in conjunction with the 19-20 millimeter one if you're using an MZL connector on an 8000 series from Sennheiser, or a Sherps with the Limo on the back, like a CCM. So but the whole principle behind the hoop and the clip arrangement was to separate the function of the two different things. So, you know, the suspension itself and the hoop can be, you know, we make them in 4 different Shaw hardnesses. We call them they're a Shaw D. So the softest, the very soft, being 55D, and then we do 62D, 72D, which is standard, and then 82D. And every rad mount we make, we put them in the box. We fit them with 72s, but then we have the spares in the box. The whole idea about that was that if you had the clip the same material as the suspension hoop, you're always compromising at some point in everything that we do. But you know, if you have a very, very soft suspension to, you know, to allow for compliance on a very light small microphone, then the clip would have to be soft as well. So, and then respect to, you know, you go the other way, you know, you've got something for an A16, you know, and you've got to, you know, have a very stiff, you know, 82 Shaw D mount. The clip is like almost impossible to get the microphone in. So by doing this, this allowed us the functionality to be separated completely. So the suspension could be soft and the clip could be the perfect weight for holding the mic securely. The only thing about these clips, the ones that you see here in shot now, there's always a bit of an element of us sort of like trying to look at any way we can, you know, save a little bit of weight or speed the actual you know, fitting of the microphones in some cases. So the soft grip on the ones that we were showing at the beginning is very secure, and with a strap even more secure, so it will never come out, you know, in aggressive moves or when it's being used in sports and being left in a case, or, you know, being rigged without looking at the mic. When it comes to sort of like production sound, where every gram, you know, at the top of the pole counts, that's why we did this sort of like the lighter weight ones. Also allows you to get them closer together because the actual side profile is, you know, just a few millimeters smaller. So when it comes to, say, something like the Mini CMIT that you've got in shot now, you can actually you can do the hoops both same direction, or you can sort of like reverse them, and you can actually bring the clip very close together. You can't really do that on the heavier mics, because you then start getting sag, and also the sort of like the mic won't come back to center. But the clips and the hoops being separate were one of the key things at the very beginning when we were looking at the rad mount, of how to separate from learnings from previous experience. So that's why they're like that.
Someone just actually asked about the RSM 191. Which Mini-ALTO will this fit? This is, I believe, going to fit in the upcoming 250 size Mini-ALTO that you'll be able to put this mic in. This is obviously a retrofitted into another blimp, and I'll just show another pic just for reference. Our suspension hoops will retrofit into some older blimps. So if you have, say, an 8070 or an 816 and you want to improve some of the suspension, you can retrofit this into the older blimps, because the slots at the bottom will fit in there. But back to the 191, again, I believe this is going to be a Mini-ALTO 250 size that's coming out soon.
We'd have to check just to make sure that the sizing and the fit of it will be okay in terms of the microphone. The issue with the Mini-ALTO that we'll always run into with we've had it a lot recently with questions about Ambio and other mics where the cable is chunky. Where we're in control of the cable, it's one thing, but when it's looking at the DIN plug coming out the back of the RSM 191, I can't remember off the top of my head, but the maximum diameter out of the Mini-ALTO we kind of set was 7 millimeters. Once you go beyond that 7 millimeters, because the exit or the cable exit out of the Mini-ALTO is between the two central rings on the Mini-ALTO, you would then start interfering with the magnets doing their job, and that would be a no-no. So I just have to check. So we're getting a few questions like that where heavier duty cables, which wouldn't normally we would have assumed going into the Mini-ALTO, because we sort of set it the upper limit at 7 mil, well 6 mil usage, but 7 mil was the maximum. But if the cable fits, then like John said, the 250 I think is the right one.
And we'll talk a little more about the cable exits on the Mini-ALTO coming up. I will go back to this picture with the mini cements just to bring up another question about the hoops. We get questions about which hoops should I use for which microphones. So this is a complicated question, because the answer is always it depends. It depends on what you're sliding on the front. It depends on how fast you're booming. It depends on the weight of the mic. It depends on a lot of different variables. So that's why we can give you some general guidance on where I think to start, and then you kind of have to play around with what fits you best. But I will say, as you mentioned on the hoops, the design of the actual hoops, being that curvature, is a special design when it comes to suspensions, because you can actually use a single hoop for shock mounting, because that curve does act as a dampener. Whereas if it did not have the curve and the shape that you designed it to have, it would just potentially just fall flat over, right? So could you talk just a little bit about the uniqueness of that shape? And then I did hear you mention about the recentering of the mic. So you can put the hoops opposing each other for recentering. You can put them like Tim White did here, where they're facing the same direction for lighter mics. But maybe just talk a little bit about the uniqueness in that design of the hoops.
Sure. So we've got two hoops. The one that you're seeing in front of it is the Rad 2, and then we've got a skinnier one called the Rad 1. When I say skinny, the key two differences are the width of the sides of the hoop. The heights and the diameters are the same for both, and the center point is the same for both. So they will both work inside a Mini-ALTO, or for that matter, another brand's basket. You could fit them on a modular, for instance. But the two different hoops are designed to work in the same way in terms of controlling compliance. Very accurately can control the compliance of shotgun microphones, and up to sort of like probably about 450 millimeter long microphones. So we comfortably cover that. The thinner ones, the ones that we supply on the Rad 1s, were actually originally intended not to be used on a shock mount. They were only ever going to be used on the suspension. So when I'm talking about shock mounts versus suspensions, the shock mount is where it's cantilevering and holding the back of the microphone, whereas the cradle suspension, if you like, is when you're equally, or you're as far apart as possible. You're trying to get the hoops to then act almost like a pirate ship at a fair, where you're swinging. And so what you can see in there is that with the MKH50 clips, you've got the Rad 1 ones, and they're thinner on the sidewall and also on the top. You'll notice they're flat, whereas on the Rad 2, they're braced. They've got like traps, if you like, on the top. What that does is, because these are used mainly for shock mounts, in other words, holding at the very back of the microphone, they're actually preventing the lean. They're still allowing the actual compliance of the microphone to move along the axis of the microphone, but they're sort of like there's more resistance at the top to stop them leaning forward. So, but when we were developing the Rad mount, one of the things that we were looking at was how we could assess the best setup, whether, like John said, with different foams, different because everyone's got different things, whether it's a bubble bee on the front or a softy on the front, or one of ours. There's lots of different combinations of things, and then you've got the length of the cable, you've got the weight of the cable, the diameter of the cable, the connectors, the type of job you're working on, the type of pole, and the preference for how people want to use it. So when we started, we were trying to test all the various configurations, and because you can mix and match different hardnesses of the same type of hoop. You can mix and match different hardnesses or the same hardnesses of the different types of hoop as well. So we started getting to a position where we had almost infinite different combinations we could try, and then there was different types of poles that people were using. So bit of a cop out, but we ended up then deciding it was a lot easier to put a standard 72 Shore version of the hoop on the mount, and then just put all the spares in the box. So the other thing was that every time we would talk to people about their preference with the same microphone, in some cases everyone would have a different view. So that's kind of a good thing as well. It's a kind of subjective thing where we're not saying specifically this is how you rig up the 416 or the MKH50. We can say how people have used it and how people, greatly respected sort of soundies in the industry are using this with their MKH50. But in some ways, the cop out was that we just put everything in the box and let you guys decide. So that was the real theory behind the whole thing. So.
And there is one thing on here I'll point out, which is again the reason why it makes it difficult to specify for every single mic, which is, and this is just my experience with the 416. There's some mics where you're putting a slide on for on the front, and you want a stiff hoop on the front to prevent some drooping. The 416, because of the way it sits in the rad mount, it's an interesting mic because of its weight. What I found is if you put the stiffer hoop on the back, if you're just using foam, you put the stiffer hoop on the back, it almost acts as a rudder, and it prevents the front movement a little better than having a stiff hoop on the front and a soft hoop on the back. But then you have a lighter mic like a CMIT 5, where you can actually use two of the really soft hoops, and you get a similar kind of ability to move around. So it really is mic by mic dependent. I think this is something we have discussed where we're looking at two possibilities of how to communicate more information on this. Is one, maybe a baseline starting point, and then with a slightly stiffer, slightly harder step 1, step 2 option that we recommend and do a table on. The other thing is we've mentioned possibly looking at how do we get maybe a list of customer feedback to show how other people are setting these up and make that a shareable thing, so everyone can kind of learn from each other and based on what they're using for maybe mimic some different setups. Okay, so lastly, when it comes to just the rad mount, we talked about the hoops. One thing is back to the will they break, and for those of us for those who haven't seen the video, this is just me lifting various weights literally with a rad mount to just show you can bend them, you can stretch them, you can push them. They're pretty darn durable. And to me, quite honest, when I got to 45-pound plate on there, I was expecting something to give. I was thinking maybe the screw, maybe like, but yeah, it held up just fine. So definitely dependable, durable. Good job on the design and manufacturing on that, Simon.
Thank you.
So next question comes Mini-ALTO. For those who, again, to me, this is another, once you use it, it becomes second nature, but that first usage, how do I open the Mini-ALTO? So how do you recommend opening the Mini-ALTO?
Well, out of the box, we've had a couple of people who've sort of said, because we do kits where if you already own a rad mount, we just do what's called an add-on kit, which is what you see, the basket with the two little tabs on either side, and then an adapter we're calling the smiley face that can fit onto a rad mount, and then you can update it. So the first point is when that comes and you receive it in the box, those two little tabs, the black tab, you can just see like a butterfly tab, sort of like halfway down where the middle rings are. Those, again, a bit like the clips, they're just safety tabs, so you can use them. But in most cases, especially if you're going to be going inside and out quickly, taking on and off a fur and everything like that, you probably won't leave them on. Again, they're another bit of thing dedicated more to something where it's going to be fitted to a stadium or the side of a track, in sports, motor racing and things like that. So the first point, take the two tabs off or unbutton at least one side of both tabs. And then when we're describing it, the easiest way, if you're pulling off if you're separating the magnets or the front and back, and you're trying to do it in line along the length of the magnets, the resistance and the force of those magnets will always resist it to the point where you think you're going to break it. So the best way of doing it is if you're looking down from above, is to go east-west, or what we're saying is break an egg. So as long as once it's separated in one side and on one side, it'll just come away very easily. If you try and pull it along the line of it, you'll really struggle to open it. So we're always saying break an egg or east-west. Once you've done it a few times, it becomes very intuitive, but it's the initial fear of breaking something that you've just taken out of the box. So you shouldn't worry about breaking it, but the easiest way to do it is east-west. Hold the ring at the very front or hold the ring at the back, and then you'll see the channel that it goes into on the smiley face is a very wide channel, which is to aid in terms of fitting the actual baskets and removing them as well. So it's quite intuitive, but the initial fear that people have had, is that I'm trying to force something that shouldn't come apart. So just always go away. The magnets, you'll see the ridges down the line of the ring, or going all the way around the ring. That's where the magnets are, and they're in the actual smiley face as well. So you're just trying to break that, sort of like magnetic force by going sideways rather than in line. So.
One other thing I think tip from a couple of people have said, like when you crack it, take the front off first, because the rear pod is smaller, so it's easier to just hold up by itself, and vice versa. When you put it back on, you slide the rear one on first because you're holding the pole or the mount, and then swap hands and pop the other one on. But I think for anyone who's used say one of your previously designed products that makes a very satisfying quick release product you once made, that click is really satisfying. To me, this is exactly what happens. Once you get them used to the Mini-ALTO and you get it close and it clicks into place, there's such a satisfying moment of using the Mini-ALTO every time. Just click, click, and then it just becomes easy, second nature. Next question. Once you get the Mini-ALTO open, we talked about how to put the mic in, but I think this is one of the key ones. How do I route my jumper cable? So I've got a picture here, and I'll go through a couple of the piece of feedback we've gotten on this, and then you can give more explanation as we go. So first of all, you're going to need to double your jumper cable back through the rear hoop as seen here, and then it'll come out of this side exit hole on the smiley face bracket of the Mini-ALTO. So if you have a complete kit, this is already fitted. If you get an add-on kit for your rad mount, you'll have to screw in the smiley face bracket. So now the question is, once I have my cable doubled back to that rear hoop, where do I lock it off? So with some mics, it's perfectly fine to lock it off as seen here in this picture with it underneath that safety strap in between the rear clips. This is one of our cables for the Mini-ALTO, so it's got a silicone sheath on it, and you don't get a lot of cable noise transmission. Other mics, depending on how you're using it, size, boom pole, everything in the chain, you may want to lock it off in a different spot. So some people actually are fine locking it off on the actual mic itself and then routing it out the cable exit. With these mini cements, I don't have a super close up, but you can see right here, it's using a very thin cable and it's actually locked off on this. There's a bar on the smiley face bracket itself. And so this one's literally permanently locked off on this bar with cable ties. But you can lock it off with rad cable straps that come in the box, or any other kind of tie. So and then it goes out the exit. So this is the new blue cable plug that will come with Mini-ALTOs of the future, and it'll have this blue plug on the cables, so it really seats well into that cable exit. So that's my spiel on. This is some of the feedback we've gotten on how to route the cable. Your go, Simon. How would you route the cable? What do you recommend people do with routing their cable for the Mini-ALTOs?
Well, I think it's a good example of when we did the beta testing, field testing, and we sort of like started shipping those before Christmas. We knew there were going to be areas that were more tricky than others. So when I say tricky, because if we're in control of rigging every jumper cable in every rad mount, we would do it with the skinniest 2mm cable that we could find, fit them out the door and lock them off. The trouble is that we're not, we know that we sell rad mounts, and we're going to be selling Mini-ALTOs to people who want to put their own cables in, whether that's a short one or a direct to us, or like an A20 or something like that. So that's always going to was one of the areas that we knew we were going to have to do some little improvements. And so one of the first products we did was the little it's called a cable plug, and we've done 2 different sizes. The cable plugs effectively follow the form of the cable exit, the plastic part, of the smiley. You can slit them with a razor blade, but the whole idea is that we're going to sort of supply these to anyone that makes up cables, or anyone who's buying a Mini-ALTO. You'll get them in the kit, but you can actually fit them, and then refit an XLR, or you can do them at the point where you're actually making up the XLR cables. 2 sizes, one that's 4.75, that one that you just saw there, and then this one is goes from 1.6 up to about 3.5mm. Once those are on there, they can slide up and down with a bit of sort of like effort, because they're quite grippy. They're a TPE, like a silicon rubber, but they seal and they lock out into the actual the smiley face cable exit. So I think we're going to do different sizes. When we first started shipping, we did what was called a cable gland. They're going to still go in there. That's more of a retrofit. It looks like it's like a tiny little cotton reel with a split. So that fits around microphones, jams in there. But we've seen lots of different configurations, lots of people doing it. But it's always the weakest link. The cable and the management of the cable is always going to be critical in terms of the performance of this basket. So if it was us doing it and it was dedicated and it was locked out, I would go as thin as possible. And then a bit like Tim's photos, where he used a pair of cable ties, used the sort of like, that was some of the first prototype cable plugs. So you can just see the little blue dots coming out, 2 cable ties. It's difficult for us to recommend that every time, because we're also saying that you could switcheroo in terms of the microphone in this mount. So if we say you lock it down with a cable tie, even though you can take a pair of snips, sometimes people won't want to do that. So hence the reason actually we designed the cable straps. So the reason for the cable straps the little blue ones that come in every kit, a long and a short one, was that you could either do what Tim's done here, and instead of cable ties, you use the cable strap to lock it to the little bar that's on the smiley face, or you can, use the strap directly onto the microphone. The cable's then coming at the right point, but obviously dressing the cable is super important. So if you have tension in that cable, and you've got a bit of sort of like a short circuit, and the suspension just won't work as well as it would if it was a small cable. So, but yeah, and then the other thing, just to state the obvious, you'll have seen on all of our photos, we're sort of like tending to recommend Cable Techniques short, low profile XLRs. The back of the first three sizes of Mini-ALTOs, the 115, the 180, and the 210, all have the same rear pod, which is just 50 millimeters body length, so 2 inches. Anything longer, the conventional way back was to always use a 50 millimeter or 2-inch recommendation for allowing the XLR an addressed cable. All of our sizing is based on low profile short XLRs. So again, it's another thing. A lot of people have been doing it for a long time now, but in terms of the sizing and how we recommend what microphone for what Mini-ALTO, it's always based on allowing for about a 20 millimeter XLR on the back of the microphone. So
and I'll just pull up a picture of that smaller, shorter one. So for one question I've got is length of jumper cable. If someone's going to provide their own cable, what is kind of the length that you recommend, and does it make a difference based on which Mini-ALTO they're buying?
I would say 275 millimeters is the one that we're recommending. The only reason I sort of like slightly hesitate, it depends on what you're putting on the top of the pole. If you're doing a transmitter at the top of the pole, and you don't want to use on the side of the rad mount, there's cable cleats, on the outside of the actual mount that allows you to secure cables from sort of like 6-7 mil down to 1.5 millimeters. The reason I hesitate a little bit is because a lot of people are now going straight into the TX, so if that's the case, you see just underneath where the Mini-ALTO is there, you see these little, lugs sticking out, their cable cleats. If you're not using those, you don't want to have any slack, you don't want to have excess length of cable. So it could be between 260 millimeters and 275 millimeters. On the first three sizes. Sometimes you might want to, on the longer microphones or even the digital ones, when we're talking with the CMD 42 with a K-MIT, where the rear pod on the longer ones is slightly longer, you might want to stay closer to the 275 millimeter lengths.
Okay. Next question is going to be the Mini-ALTO's facing the opposite direction. So can you, and it's hard to explain without this picture here. So as you can see here, for the longer Mini-ALTOs, the actual neck of the mount part kind of curves backwards. So then your center of gravity is better when you have a longer mic on it. And people have asked, can I swap the Mini-ALTO around the other way? And I think a lot of that comes from the smaller mics, the short mics. So what's the answer to that one?
Yeah, yes, you can. So, I mean, as we had with the rad mount, before we were even talking, Mini-ALTOs, we put arrows on, assuming, this way around, the orientation is the longer bit at the front. I would say 80-90% of the people who've bought rad mounts that I've seen have reversed it. So ignored the arrows, and it makes sense because you want front heavy. When the reason we did it the way we did it was because if you can imagine, this wasn't in the form with a blimp on there, and it had a sort of like a front, slip-on windshield like a Softy or a Nimbus. If you take the line of where the boom adapter is as the balance point, and you've got microphone plus XLR plus the slip-on windshield, that then becomes the balance point, of the actual, the overall sort of like mass of the top of the pole. When you're using the rad mount and you're doing an interior and you want to get as tight to the ceiling as possible, and you've got not a lot of space, you want to be reversing it. So Simple answer is yes. In whether you're using it as a rad mount or whether you're using it as a rad mount with a Mini-ALTO, you can reverse it. And as long as the screws that hold the smiley face onto the rad mount, as long as you're using all of those and you're not sort of like just only using one, which could potentially cause a bit of movement and therefore noise, it's fine to reverse it.
Okay. I will add just one thing to that as well, and this is just my experimentation with a bunch of different mics. Depending on the mic and the weight and how long the interference tube is, and then where you position the XLR holder. So if you have a transmitter on the front, and you turn the holder around to where it's facing the front, you then tend to get the mic to naturally drop downward facing. If you position your transmitter off to the side or to the rear, I think that's another thing to experiment with beforehand to make sure that feel on the pole, depending on where your transmitter is at, naturally is the way you want it to fall. So, and that's kind of a answering a question that I think people asked a lot up front, but now they've gotten used to, which is that XLR holder on the boom mount just spins around 360. It does a clicking noise as you spin it. You're not going to break it. Spin it around all the way, or it comes off if you're not using it and using some other form of transmitter holder. Okay, quickly, fur covers for the Mini-ALTOs. So this is another question that come up. We have two versions of the fur covers. We have a gray hair, long, and a shorter multi-pile black fur cover. There's not a huge difference, I think, in the wind performance on these, although the long-haired gray, I'd estimate, again, you'll probably talk dB, I talk miles per hour. I'd estimate it's 3-4 miles an hour better wind protection than the black. For all of the prototype units, so when we first sent out prototype kits, all of those had the black. So a lot of people might have seen posts and information with the black fur kits, but just to say they're also long-haired gray fur available as well. And we've redesigned those during that prototype phase based on the feedback to remove the drawstrings and put snap fasteners or poppers. So now you should be able to more easily pull the fur over the front, cover the back, and then snap the fasteners, and you get a really nice snug fit that covers up the entire bottom of that smiley face bracket and a little bit of the neck of the mount. So that's just to let people know that's what's available when it comes to fur wind covers. Anything on fur? You are way more of a fur expert and have experienced it than me, although we will ask Megan to join at some point and she can really dig into the fur. But
no, I would reiterate. I mean, we quote up to 40 dB, in terms of wind noise reduction, obviously depending on the conditions. The grey fur does edge the black fur. The compilate, it's the build of the actual fur is identical. They're both custom. The backing is identical. The only difference is the density of the pile. On the black one is slightly denser around the sort of like where the fibers sort of like come out of the actual the weave. So transparency identical, gray edges it, but I wouldn't say it's much more than about 2 or 3 more dB, in terms of over the black. So they're very similar, but the gray is obviously a very classic, very familiar sort of like fur that people will be used to. But the black we did originally because we thought, as it was an in to out, product, in terms of interiors to exterior work, there was more likely that it was preferred to be black. But we're probably seeing it almost a split, 60% black, 40% gray. So so, and also we're looking at other ones at the moment. Our challenge with fur as a sort of like limited in space where we've I've got facilities over here in the UK, is that when we do the fur, when we have it made, we have to make up quite a lot of it. I mean, I think it's about 300 linear meters. So if you can imagine, each roll is about my height, about 6 foot, 1.2, so about 1 foot, 1.85 meters high by about 25 meters, and we have to buy 300 linear meters of this stuff every time we make it up. So we can't just buy it off the shelf, unfortunately. So when we make it, we commit to making that one color or another color. So we are looking at a couple of others because we've had some sort of like requests. So, but it'd be interesting to hear if anyone's got ideas of other colors. I think beige is one of the ones we're looking at because it's even more neutral than gray. So if there are any suggestions, by all means throw them in there, but just caveat that with we have to order 300 odd linear meters of the stuff when we do.
It depends. There is to add on to what you said about that, I think the black versus gray versus maybe a very light color all depends on the situation, because if you're doing a close mic indoors and you want a little more light bounce, maybe you want a very light fur. So as you say, it's a situation where the more feedback we get saying we need X, Y, and Z type of fur, once it hits that critical mass of not being a one-off, it makes it much easier for us to go out and source the right kind of fur. As you mentioned rolls, I will also say we've got some feedback, and this is just a tip for anybody who's got a fur. When you get it, stretch it out, stick your hand in it, push the lining inside, making sure it's fully out and hitting all the insides of the other fur, just in case the blue lining snagged, because we've had that where somebody's like, oh, it's fitting kind of tight, and then we just tell them, take it off, put your hand in there, smash around and give it a stretch. Because if you think about this massive roll of fur, you might have fur that's in the middle of there that's been compressed for a certain amount of time. So the backing on that hasn't had the ability to stretch out like the exterior part of that fur. So it's one of those, don't be scared to give it a nice tug, get your hand in there, stretch the fur out. But obviously anything wrong or it doesn't fit or it doesn't, have a tight, remove all the openings, anything you've got, by all means, we'll take care of it as well. But that's just an extra tip. If you think it's tight, give it a stretch, because you may just need to stretch out the fur because it was one of those pieces made from an interior part of the roll. Okay, we're getting down to some easier questions, I would say. Is there a Mini-ALTO for the CMET 5? I will let you answer that one, Simon. While I pull up something on.
So we got three sizes coming in version 1.2. The first one is 250, where the dimensions equate approximately to the body length from front ring to the rear ring of the Mini-ALTO. So we've got a 250, which I can't see the top bits, but these are the.
So these are Sanken up top and Shups. Bottom. So
yeah. So we've got a 250. But to the answer to the question on the on the CMET 5, the 416 NTG3 as well, I think we got a 280 as well. So I think that'll be quite a popular one. I think the 250, we're doing it for the CMD 42 KMET and the 8018 as well, the new stereo one coming out of Sennheiser as well. So it's got a whole range of them, different sizes and everything. And then the very longest we've got is the 300. Going back to the CMET, if you were using, like I said earlier about the short XLR, then we would say the 280. If you're using the 416 or the CMET with a straight XLR, which is what some of the sports guys insist on because they don't want to be mucking around with short XLRs, they just want to stick with what they've got, then the 300 is good for that. The 300 is also good for the CS3 and even the MKH60 as well. So yeah.
Cool. And I'll just quickly go through, because we will make this compatibility chart public as well. But I'll go through, here's some Audio-Technica mics just to linger on the screen a little bit to give people a chance to see if their Audio-Technica mic has a Mini-ALTO that fits it. Not only does this chart show Mini-ALTO, but it does also show some of our slide on Nimbus. So you can see for like the new BP28 and BP28L from Audio-Technica, we make the custom extremely long Nimbus. For the 4027, we make a long Nimbus. But as far as the Mini-ALTO goes, that gives you an idea of Audio-Technica mics. move on to some DPA mics. So this just gives you an idea of popular DPA mics. The 4017C is one of those that has the two versions. I'm sorry, 4017 has two versions. The C will fit in the Mini-ALTO 180. The B version of that with the longer standard preamp will be the Mini-ALTO 250. So you can see for the DPA mics, it depends on which preamp you're choosing as to which of the Mini-ALTO size you pick. Back to the Sanken and Sheps, just to give you an idea. The CMD, you have the Mini-ALTO 115 for all the small CMC ones. You move up to the CMD 42s or the CMC 6 with the cut 60s. You're looking at the Mini-ALTO 180. As mentioned, the CMET 5 is the Mini-ALTO 280 with a low profile, 300 with the straight XLR. But this will come out. There's some more CMD 42s with the KMET versions down here. And lastly, just for the screen, again, we have a compatibility chart that has even more mics, but for Sennheiser mics, the 416 is going to be the Mini-ALTO 280 with the low pro XLR, the 300 with the straight XLR. The new 8018 stereo mic is the 250. If you can get a low pro XLR for those stereo cables, otherwise the straight cable, get the Mini-ALTO 280 size. And then 115 versions fit all of the small Sennheiser mics, 8020, 8030, 8040, and 8050. Which nicely brings, speaking of the 8050, 8030, question about MS setups. So we keep getting questions. I think this was an exciting part when it inadvertently was discovered that, yeah, these MS setups will fit inside the Mini-ALTO and inside the hoops. So this was a great discovery that some awesome different users experimented with and helped push us down the track to make these. So we do have MS clips coming. This is the thing that I think a lot of the field recording and sound designers keep asking about online. So once and for all, Simon, that's the 3D printed MS clips.
Yep.
This is the actual final design MS clips. When will these be coming, and can you talk about them?
Sure. So the MS, I have to admit, it was a surprise that people, knowing that we've got the larger diameter baskets coming in the form of the Alto, possibly even bigger after that. We didn't expect the interest, because we thought we were going to be doing larger hoops, for the stereo to give it a little bit more space, because obviously back in the day, it was the MKH 50 and the 3050 rather than the sort of smaller ones. But in the summer last year, we were starting to get a lot of people asking, because we were looking at foams with twin bore foams and the clips. Summer last year, we also then ran into slight snags with the Mini-ALTO development, which meant that we had to sort of like drop everything, and there was a couple of other projects that were paused as well, just so we could get the Mini-ALTO across the line. We had to retool a few things. We changed to ultrasonic welding, and that meant a lot of tools were scrapped because all the sizing was wrong. So at that point, we decided rather than try and just keep delaying it, we would release the CAD that we'd drawn on the 3D printing parts. So that one there in itself was done by Dr. Roland Harris, and but he designed a lot, and he'd worked with us on a number of things. But we then also released our own design and just said, look, anyone that can get their hands on a 3D printer, by all means, try and fit it in there. There's been DMS, there's been ORTF, there's been MS of all the various different configurations. And truth be told, I think as soon as we released these, some of the designs and the way we've achieved it, because you've got a limited amount of space, and where we on a normal clip would have a mold-in insert on the top of the clip where you can just see that little bit of metal, we couldn't do that. We didn't have the space, so it made us look at everything to try and fit it in there, because there was definitely interest. And so by the time we got to the beginning of this year, we were actually faced with well, we knew we had to do it. We'd done what we had to do on the first 3 sizes of the Mini-ALTO, even though we were processing all the field test results at that point. And so as a result of all of those, ideas that came back in from the various people who were 3D printing their own, we actually came up with this concept. So there's 2 sizes. They're only really designed for shorter microphones, so topping out at maybe, I don't know, the CMC6s as a pair. So you can't fit MKH 3050s inside the hoops. There's just not that space. So we've come up with the 2 sizes, one which is MS19, and that's designed mainly for the MKH 8030, 8040 pair, 8050 pair. And then we've also got the 20mm version, the MS20, which is designed primarily for the Sherps. 20, but it's 20 to 21, so you can use it with the CMCs in combination with the mini CMIT or the CMIT if you chose to. It looks more complicated than a normal back-to-back clip, but the reason for that is that we haven't got that much space inside the hoop. So the driving key sort of like parameter was to make sure that it was coincident, and it was also no more than 2.5 millimeters. So you can see the section on the right, bottom right, that's the section of the clips. That gap between the microphones is only 2.5 millimeters. So if you compare that to previous back-to-back clips we did when they were universal or specific sizes, that was always a tricky thing, because different diameters up and down mean that you have to have different centers of the actual microphone. So because we weren't top loading into a clip and we were mounting inside a specific size of the hoop, we were faced with the first microphone, the top microphone. When that goes in, that kicks off to the right or to the left, the lower clip, and therefore we had to put screw adjustments. So we wanted to maintain the coincident. We also wanted it to be no more than 2.5 millimeters. We also wanted it to always be vertical. So, and also, should someone want to use it with a longer microphone, say like a mini CMIT and CCM, you can actually take the lower clip off. So what you can again see on the theme of safety, there's a safety strap that brings it all together. Out of the factory, we've got 2 screws will be set up with a sort of like a slight offset. So when you load the microphones in, they still stay vertical when they're fitted. But if you chose to and you wanted to adjust it slightly with the different diameters, you can loosen the 2 screws. They're retained, they won't fall out, and you can then sort of like adjust it to get it vertical. You've got then a TPE sort of like silicon rubber strap that holds the clips in place, and there's even a shorter clip as well, shorter strap as well. So if you have taken the lower clip off and you only want to use it with say you're using a Sherp CCM with a CMC, a CMIT, or you're using an MKH 8060 with a sort of like the 30, you could just take the lower clip off, and on that then you could put the shorter strap that we're going to include in the kit as well. So long story, but the idea is that we signed off yesterday the tooling. The finish and the sparking and the engraving is being done this week. The plan is to make the clips available to start with as upgrades to anyone that's got a Mini-ALTO or a rad mount for that matter, and then we'll be doing kits following that a couple of weeks after that. Probably I think it's going to be sort of like into sort of like very end of this month or the beginning of next month that we'll start having them ready. If people have got jobs that they are going away for in the season, and they need some, by all means, give us a shout. But yeah, it's taken a while to get it right, but I think it was worth the wait, hopefully, and it gives quite a lot of flexibility, in terms of using it, and I think it'll open up a few other ideas as well that'll come from it. So,
yeah, and I'll just go back to what you're saying about removing the one clip on this. It is that kind of Lego approach where it all fits together and it builds upon itself, and then it's interchangeable. So if you have a current rad mount, your ability to use that rad mount for 4, 5, or 6 different setups is there. And then if you have 2 rad mounts, your ability to then multiply that, and you can have a dedicated setup, but all of the parts and pieces are cross compatible as well. Okay, so this will quickly lead me to a couple other questions, which I'll zoom through because the answer is the same, which is DMS. Just put a picture there where we have some 3D printed hoops from Roland Harris. and ORTF, which if anyone's read the drbadfield.com blog, he gives the story, three-part story about this ORTF setup. The short answer is the 3D print files are available. They fit with current rad mounts, but it's in the queue of to be designed with not a definitive, this is a launch date on those projects. There's quite a few other projects in the queue ahead of these before we get to designing a proper DMS or finalizing a proper ORTF setup. Unless you tell me otherwise.
No, that is correct. But I think we are going to do a basket that suits this. So it works out to be a 90mm body on either side. So that will do, and we'll do it as a fur cover. So anyone that wants to get the mounting system is a 3D thing, 3D printed file that Roland can provide. There's also slight issues with cable management and things like that. The ones here were done by Ed in terms of Shortex, MZL connectors. So there's a little bit that goes into it, but it is something that is fascinating. I know Roland, you did it with DPAs, Nevatons, Sherps like the one, Sherps, and also the MZL versions, the 8040s here. So I think it is interesting, and I think it's something that we'll look at. The other thing, when you look at this mount, obviously Roland's got it on I think it's a PCS actually there at the back, but at the back it's also showing a ball joint. That would be something that we're looking at to address another thing that's come up quite regularly with people saying about the rad mounts having the teeth. So when you're doing the adjustment, you can't get the smooth transition of just like without undoing it fully almost, and you get the you can't adjust it on the fly. So one of the things we're looking at that would be in combination with stereo, but also for the altos when they come, is a slightly different pivot and a ball joint that does that. So all things to come anyway. So but we'll be putting those out there to especially on the closed group, just to get views and opinions on that before we commit, because that's the kind of the best way of doing it, we think.
So just to clarify, on the RTF setup, we will end up having at some point in the near future a symmetrical Mini-ALTO length available if someone wants to do this 3D print. We just won't be making that bar in the near term. So that's just to put that out there of we'll have available symmetrical baskets at some point, just not necessarily the bar included with it. You'll still have to 3D print the bar or come up with your own solution for RTF inside the Mini-ALTO.
Correct.
I'll just go back to this picture. Since we're on stereo, MKH8018. There's a picture of an NAB I took. It does fit inside the the Mini-ALTO 250 size. So that's just a lot of questions we're getting from people looking at the 8018. We're kind of on the topic of this area as well. So new mic, Voyage Audio spatial mic. Sorry, this kind of cut off, but we have now got a fur pattern for the Voyage Audio spatial mics. And I believe it's the same for the Dante or the USB version. It is similar to our other fur mini wind cover, so it's got an internal foam as well as kind of this semi-elastic, grippy stretch on the inside, so it'll stay in place. We've got a lot of questions about, are you going to make one of these for the Zoom H5 Studio? And the answer to that is yes. There's just some delay in us getting that studio in-house as a loaner unit or a purchase unit. They're in limited supply right now. So we're working our best to get one of those. And we might have a friendly sound recorder in the UK that's going to allow us to borrow one of those so we can make a custom fitted fur for that. Sennheiser Ambio, can you fit that inside a Mini-ALTO? The answer to that is also yes. And I forget which size. The issue with the, I think with some of those Amazonic mics is back to cable. I think the mic itself fits inside the Mini-ALTO, and there will be a size where it'll fit, but it's more of you manage the cable exit, because some of those cables, depending on if it's how many leads they have coming out, can be quite thick. And the last one, when it comes to Mini-ALTOs, is large diaphragm mics. So we've got a request of, can I fit a large diaphragm mic like a Lewitt, especially inside the Mini-ALTO? So the answer to that is a yes, but there's not a way to do it with suspension, but this is an interesting project, I think, if there's any 3D print enthusiast, where you can create probably kind of a spacer bar to screw into the Mini-ALTO base and then center the large diaphragm mic, assuming you're just going to put it stationary and don't need any kind of suspension for that. So I do think there's a possibility in the future, but again, that's a project where it's going to be quite down the road for us. Lastly, on that question, SM57, SM58, yes, you can also fit those inside the Mini-ALTO. So anybody who's needs some capability of kind of a dynamic handheld mic, you can fit those inside the Mini-ALTO. Any input on that, Simon? I know I just ran through those questions, but these are kind of some of the last, not necessarily our wheelhouse of on the immediate roadmap, but definitely in the future idea phase.
No, I mean, ideas, I mean, when I was talking about the ball joint and things like that, a lot of those things that we're working on will also spin off into other projects and products. That's the whole way of, us doing it. So, yeah, the more ideas, the better. I think, it's always easy for me to sort of say, oh, that will come with in the bigger version down the line. But a lot of those space, when you come to windshields and shock mounts within the windshields or suspensions within the windshields, always give you that little bit more flexibility. So a lot of those, especially the larger ones, the Ambio I think is fine, and it will fit in a Mini-ALTO 250. The issue is, I think, and the cables will be fine as well getting out of the thing. It's just that the cables, by the looks of the ones that we had with the last customer I was talking this morning about, is that the XLRs are pretty short. The jumpers are not that long, so you'll be able to get them out of the basket, but then you'll have like a cow's udder hanging out the bottom of the, very close to the cable exit. So it's just managing that, which is something that, bongos or something, some form of tie to sort of strap it down. But it's just one of those things that we hadn't really thought of when we were doing this. We were looking more at, CMC6s and MKH50s and things like that. And so it's kind of spun off, but it's the sort of stuff that we do need to think about. Yeah, because a bit like the BP 4025, it's amazing how many requests we've had for the AT mic, which I just wouldn't have thought people would want to put inside something like this. So, but we've done significant, or had loads of inquiries about them anyway. So again, we are going to be using Cable Techniques short jumper cables, 5-pin to 5-pin. They won't be ready at launch of the larger versions. They're going to be a few weeks down the line. And then we'll also be doing the MS ones at the same time as do the MS launch. So again, cables is always a bit of a tricky one for us, because there's so many great people making cables out there. Whether that's Cable Techniques in the US or, smaller companies over here making them up. So we kind of accept the fact that people like having their own cables done. And even for the digital sort of side, we don't touch that, and probably will not touch the digital cables, making them up. So happy to supply the bits and the little rubber TPE cable plug as required, but for the most part we'll leave that to the experts, but then probably will make up a few of the most popular sort of size kits with cables, and then just leave it for the others to be made up by the specialists. So.
Cool. That is the next to the last question. So the last question, I'll zoom out to big screen now, just comes from a couple of people, and there's separate questions on this, but I don't have a radius reseller in my area. Can you get one in my area, or how do I purchase it if there's not one in my area? Again, this is something where we're doing our best to get as many resellers across different regions as we can. But if you need a product and want to purchase, by all means, contact us direct, because we will help find a way however we can to get it. If we're allowed to ship to a country, we have a reseller close by that can ship to a country, we'll do our best to try to make it happen. So for anyone who's in a region that doesn't have a reseller, they should contact us directly, and we'll try to work out some way to get a kit to their region. So that is the last question. Anything that we covered, Simon, that you want to last minute get out the way or clarify that I
No, I think like John, on the last point you mentioned about the people who will reply to any of the sort of like questions will be John and I, and some of the things like when we're talking about doing instruction sheets or who's doing it as a small team, we're either making the product, collecting the product from our other unit in Stroud, or we're trying to get we ship out of a part of the world called Devon in the UK, where no one can get the trucks to our site, so we end up sort of like delivering it to trucks and meeting them. So that sort of side, I only say that it's because you'll deal with us if you sort of like contact us. So we want to keep it that way, because ultimately we've come from an environment where we were quite in a corporate world for a couple of years at least. We've learned from that. We know that the important thing is that when someone rings up, they get someone who knows what they're talking about. If you write to us, you get an answer from the one person, who then deals with it and sort of like follows it through. So in that sense, that's why we're keeping the sort of like chain of communications as small as possible, because there is only 7 of us anyway. So, the more feedback, the more questions, problems, that's what we're here to do in terms of solving them, whether that's technical or commercially in terms of getting things in people's hands. We are quite limited in terms of resources, but we'll do everything we can to answer those questions quickly. So.
Again,
All good.
couldn't say it better. All good. So thank you very much, Simon, for hanging out a little longer than we normally talk throughout the day and answering questions. And I would just say, for anybody who's seen this or has a question or needs information, as Simon mentioned, you can contact us on any of our social media channels. You can contact us by direct message. You can email us at hello@radiuswindshields.com. You can go to our website and contact us through the contact form. And as Simon mentioned, it will be one of us who actually answers that question. That's not an outsourced response you're getting. You're getting a direct answer from one of us who deals with the product on a daily basis. So if you have any questions or need any information, again, reach out. We try to get back as fast as we can, usually within the day, if not the next day. So that will conclude this. Thanks again, Simon, and catch you on the next meeting / live stream we do.
Thanks, everyone. Cheers.